Michael J. Fox. Imagine waking up one morning feeling completely normal, and then, in just a few seconds, finding yourself on the cold kitchen floor, unable to get up. No warning, no time to prepare. Just the sudden, brutal reminder that your body is no longer yours to control. That's exactly what happened to Michael J. Fox at the age of 64. The man who once sprinted across movie sets, cracked jokes on late-night shows, and convinced the entire world he had everything under control, was crawling across his kitchen floor, inch by inch, just to reach his phone. And here's what hit hardest. That moment on the floor wasn't a surprise to Michael. Deep down, he'd seen it coming for over 30 years. He just refused to believe it. So today, we're going behind the smile, behind the optimism, behind one of Hollywood's most beloved performances. Not on screen, but in real life. Because what Michael J. Fox has been quietly living through since the age of 29 is more dramatic, more emotional, and more inspiring than anything he ever filmed. Let's get into it. Michael Andrew Fox was born on June 9, 1961, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. He was the fourth of 5 kids, and his childhood was anything but stable. His father served in the Canadian Armed Forces, which meant the family was constantly moving from one town to the next. No permanent friendships, no real roots, just boxes, new schools, and starting over again and again. Now Michael was small, barely 5'4", and he had this big dream of becoming a professional ice hockey player. Canada, hockey, you know how that goes. But that dream quietly faded when it became obvious that his size was going to be a problem. What happened next, though, was almost accidental. He stumbled into a drama club in middle school, probably just looking for something to do, and suddenly, everything clicked. His drama teacher recognized the spark immediately. This kid had something. By 1979, at just 17 years old, Michael had already made his professional television debut in Canada. And then came the decision that changed everything. He dropped out of high school, packed his bags, and moved to Los Angeles to chase acting. Now, think about that for a second. No diploma, no connections. Just a teenager from Canada walking into one of the most competitive cities on the planet saying, "I'm going to make it." The early years were rough. Failed auditions, bit parts, rejection after rejection. There were moments he genuinely questioned whether he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. But in 1982, everything shifted. He landed the role of Alex P. Keaton on the sitcom Family Ties, a sharp, suit-wearing, conservative teenager living in a house full of liberals. The character was quirky, funny, and completely unexpected. And Michael played him so brilliantly that he didn't just fit into the show. He took it over entirely. Audiences fell in love with him almost overnight. For 7 years on Family Ties, Michael J. Fox became the biggest name on American television. 3 Emmy Awards, a Golden Globe, thousands of fan letters pouring in every single week. And somewhere along the way, he met the woman who would become the love of his life, actress Tracy Pollan, who played his on-screen girlfriend before becoming his real one. But television stardom wasn't enough for Michael. Because right in the middle of all that success, he was handed the role that would define him forever. Marty McFly in Back to the Future. Here's the wild part. The production schedule was an absolute nightmare. Michael was still filming Family Ties full-time. So to make both work, he was pulling 20-hour days, 6 days a week. Sleep-deprived, stretched beyond limits, running on pure adrenaline and ambition. And you know what? It worked. Back to the Future became a global phenomenon in 1985. Marty McFly, red puffer vest, skateboard, time-traveling DeLorean, became one of the most iconic characters in cinema history. That same year, Teen Wolf also hit big, and just like that, Michael J. Fox wasn't just a TV star anymore. He was a genuine Hollywood legend. The late 80s and early 90s were his kingdom. Hit after hit. Fame, money, respect, a beautiful wife, a growing family. From the outside, his life looked absolutely perfect. And that's exactly when everything quietly started to fall apart. It was November 1990. Michael was 29 years old, still at the peak of everything, filming Doc Hollywood on location. One night, he'd been out drinking with co-star Woody Harrelson, and the next morning he woke up and noticed something strange. His left pinky finger was trembling. Not a little, uncontrollably. He figured it was the hangover. He figured it would stop. It didn't stop. By 1991, after the tremor persisted for weeks, he finally saw a neurologist, and the doctor delivered 4 words that rearranged his entire world. Early onset Parkinson's disease. A degenerative neurological condition. Progressive, incurable, and extraordinarily rare in someone his age. To put it plainly, his brain was slowly losing its ability to control his body, and there was nothing medicine could do to reverse it. Michael sat with that diagnosis in complete silence. And then he made a decision that, honestly, a lot of people would have made in his shoes. He decided to hide it. From the public, from colleagues, from almost everyone. Because he was 29 years old. Because his career was on fire. Because he simply wasn't ready to let the world define him by a disease. What followed was one of the most extraordinary performances of his career, and none of it was filmed. For 7 years, Michael J. Fox acted in front of cameras, performed live on stage, attended award shows, and gave interview after interview, while secretly managing symptoms that were getting harder to hide every single day. He developed little tricks, holding props to disguise a trembling hand, shifting his weight constantly, adjusting his posture to create the illusion of control. He calculated medication timing down to the minute, making sure he peaked, meaning his symptoms were most suppressed, right when the cameras were rolling. When people ask how nobody noticed, Michael's answer is heartbreakingly simple. Because I didn't want them to. But behind closed doors, the pressure was suffocating. Every day was a mental marathon. When did he take his last dose? How long before it wore off? What if a tremor hit mid-scene during a live taping? That anxiety was a constant, relentless companion. And to cope with it, Michael turned to alcohol. He started drinking every day. Alone, mostly. Quietly. Bottles of wine became a way to mute the fear that never left him. He got clever about it too, suggesting to his wife Tracy that they share a bottle, then slipping away to the kitchen to drink half of another one in private, just so the levels would match when he brought it back. Tracy didn't realize the extent of it at first, but she was watching, and she was worried. He was also pushing himself professionally beyond any reasonable limit. More projects, more time away from home, more distraction, because if he stayed busy enough, maybe the disease couldn't catch up to him. That's not how Parkinson's works, of course. But grief and denial don't respond to logic. The turning point came in 1992. Michael woke up from a drunken stupor on the sofa and found his infant son crawling on him, while Tracy stood watching with an expression he'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something colder, more final. She looked at him and said quietly, "Is this the man I want?" And then she told him she would never leave him. Both things at once. A question and a commitment. And somehow, that combination broke through everything he'd built around himself. Michael went to Alcoholics Anonymous. He got therapy. He quit drinking completely, and stayed sober for more than 30 years. But getting sober opened a new kind of pain. As he put it himself, sobriety made me worse than when I was drinking. Because now there was nothing between him and the reality of what he was living with. No escape, no blur, just the truth, every single morning. And that's when he made the bravest decision of his life. In late 1998, at the age of 37, Michael J. Fox told the world. Through a major television interview and a cover story that ran worldwide, he publicly disclosed his Parkinson's diagnosis for the first time. He had been living with it for 7 years. The reaction was enormous. Thousands of letters, messages of support, flooding in from every corner of the globe. People were stunned, not just because he was sick, but because he had hidden it so completely, for so long, while continuing to give performances that nobody questioned. Now here's what's remarkable about how Michael handled that moment. He didn't want sympathy. When the interviewer framed his situation as a fight for his life, Michael pushed back immediately. He said, "I'm not fighting. I'm not suffering. I'm dealing with it. I'm living with it." And that distinction matters more than it might seem, because how you language your own struggle shapes how you experience it. He also revealed that just months earlier, in March 1998, He had undergone an extremely risky brain surgery to help control his tremors, a procedure called a thalamotomy, nearly 90% effective, but carrying risks of paralysis, coma, or death. Michael had walked into that operating room knowing what could happen, and he'd done it anyway, because he needed his body back enough to keep working, keep showing up, keep being present for his family. After going public, something unexpected happened. He felt relief, genuine, deep relief. No more hiding, no more calculations, no more checking whether someone noticed his hand shake. For the first time in nearly a decade, he could just breathe on set. And then he channeled everything, the pain, the years of hiding, the hard-won acceptance, into something larger than himself. He founded what became one of the most impactful Parkinson's research organizations in the world, raising over $2 billion and bringing together scientists and doctors from around the globe. He turned his private battle into a public mission, and he never stopped. Of course, not everyone was gracious about it. A prominent radio broadcaster publicly accused Michael of exaggerating his symptoms in a campaign commercial, essentially calling his visible tremors a performance designed to manipulate viewers. The accusation spread fast and sparked furious debate across the country. People were outraged on Michael's behalf. But Michael himself, he responded with something that honestly takes more strength than anger would have. He shrugged it off. He said publicly that engaging with someone who wasn't genuinely invested in understanding the disease was pointless. He couldn't win that argument, so he didn't try. He just kept working. In 2018, the challenges escalated dramatically. Michael discovered a benign tumor pressing against his spinal cord. Surgery was unavoidable. The operation went well, but recovery meant 4 months of relearning how to walk, starting from scratch, like a toddler, through intense pain and complete dependence on others. For a man who had spent 30 years insisting he didn't need help, that was its own kind of reckoning. He returned to his Manhattan apartment to recover alone. His family offered to stay. One of his twin daughters volunteered to come every morning to help make breakfast and get him to the studio. He thanked her and said no. He needed to do it himself. That stubbornness, the same quality that had fueled his entire career, is both his greatest strength and the thing that has cost him most physically. And then came that morning on the kitchen floor. One simple turn around a bench. One moment of distraction. And suddenly he was down, staring up at the ceiling, in real pain, thinking about every time his family had asked him to slow down and he'd smiled and waved it off. He couldn't wave it off anymore. That fall changed something in Michael. Not his spirit, that remains almost absurdly intact, but his understanding of what courage actually means. He'd spent decades defining courage as pushing through, showing up, refusing to quit. And that's part of it. But lying on that floor, he understood something new. Sometimes courage is asking for help. Sometimes it's slowing down. Sometimes it's admitting that you can't do everything alone. And that needing people doesn't make you weaker, it makes you human. That realization led him to create a deeply honest documentary about his life with Parkinson's. No airbrushing, no inspirational soundtrack drowning out the hard parts. Just the real thing. The falls, the fear, the humor, the love, the loss. And yes, even in a documentary about a degenerative neurological disease, Michael J. Fox finds ways to make you laugh. Because that's who he is. When he fell on a sidewalk during filming, his response to the camera crew was, "How man, nice to meet you. You really knocked me off my feet." That's not a coping mechanism. That's character. He also showed something extraordinary in that film, how he had learned to use his Parkinson's symptoms as part of his acting in later roles. The tremors, the unpredictable movements, the loss of fine motor control. Rather than hiding them, he incorporated them into characters in ways that added layers no healthy actor could replicate. Art rising above limitation. Creativity, finding a way when the body says no. At 64 years old, Michael J. Fox has received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, recognizing a lifetime of contribution that goes far beyond entertainment. He didn't find a cure for Parkinson's. The cure he once boldly predicted by his 50th birthday hasn't arrived yet. But the research his foundation has driven forward, the awareness he has raised, the millions of patients who have felt less alone because of him. That impact is real, and it is enormous. Here's what I want you to take away from Michael's story. Life handed him one of the worst diagnoses a 29-year-old could receive. And for a while, he ran from it, hid from it, drank to escape it. But eventually he turned around and faced it, fully, publicly, with his name on it. And instead of letting it swallow him, he used it to become more compassionate, more purposeful, and more connected to other human beings than his pre-diagnosis self ever was. He once called Parkinson's a gift. People thought he was out of his mind. Maybe he was, a little. But he clarified, it's a gift that also takes things away. It takes your body, your independence, your certainty. But if you let it, it also gives you something irreplaceable. It shows you what really matters. It strips away the noise and leaves only the things worth holding on to. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If life handed you something that felt impossible, a diagnosis, a loss, a door slamming shut on everything you'd planned, would you find a way to turn it into something meaningful? Or would you let it be the end of your story? Michael J. Fox chose to make it the beginning of his best chapter. And that, more than any role he ever played, is the performance of a lifetime. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're not already following along for more stories like this one, what are you waiting for? There are more incredible lives to explore, and we're just getting started.